Let me bring in Mark Yates and Keith Beall, two guys who know quite a bit about state government in the state of Oklahoma. Good to have you guys on both this evening. Thanks for sharing your Monday nights with me.
Thank you, Scott.
First, thanks for joining us. Tell us a little bit about petroleum, Mark, your industry, because the names have changed over the years. Yeah. And there once was two, now there's one. So just give our listeners and viewers an idea about the organization you represent.
Well, the first rule is you never want to correct the host, but it is the Petroleum Alliance of Oklahoma. And we
notice I cut the marketers. I see Vance McSpadden in my mind there. So apologies. It's a new name for me.
We love the marketers. But the Petroleum Alliance of Oklahoma, which I have the privilege of working for, represents group all sizes, small, medium, and large companies in the upstream, midstream, and downstream phase of oil and gas. So that's all the way from what people perceive as oil and gas is like Devon and Chesapeake and Continental, all the way down to Valorem and everybody in between. So that's the Petroleum Alliance of Oklahoma, and we represent the entire oil and gas industry on its behalf at the Capitol and with local communities when needed and where needed.
Our other guest this evening, Mark Yates, who's a principal with Cornerstone Government Affairs, and you're representing the Power Alliance. Tell our viewers who they are.
Sure. Well, first of all, I appreciate you having us on the show, Scott. The Advanced Power Alliance is a regional trade association which I've worked with closely for the better part of nearly 5 years. But basically 45 member companies of that trade association that are energy companies spread across the United States, but they're developing utility scale wind, solar, energy storage technologies, and have deployed. Those companies have invested over $25 billion in the state of Oklahoma. And we've seen obviously a large growth of the wind industry over the past 20 years. But those companies are investing in renewables, and we see it as playing a complementary role to Keith and the companies that he represents in moving us forward as an energy state.
But Mark, let me start with you. If you could just kind of set the stage, and there's been a flurry of stories the last few days. We started talking about this. There was was it last summer that there were some interim hearings about this, or in the fall?
Yes, in September.
Wasn't a lot of coverage. But it's a big issue, and it has a lot to do with education. So a lot of the stories I've been reading lately I'm not sure they're telling the whole story. I'm not sure that they're not objective. It's just like there's so many moving parts to this. So for people that are at home watching this or on their phone, whatever they're doing, tell us why this is an important issue, why that the energy producers in our state are on the other side from county assessors, and what this all boils down to and what can be fixed.
Well, it's a good question, and I'll try to simplify it as much as possible. But, and I'm not going to speak for Keith, but I think at the end of the day, it doesn't take long when you drive around counties in Oklahoma and you realize that energy energy companies are investing as heavily and as much as anybody else in the state. We are an energy state, and in many of our rural counties, these are some of the largest investments that those counties see. In particular, I'll speak to wind. We've invested as an industry over 33 counties, $25 billion. These are very, very large facilities. And we have a unique situation in Oklahoma in which we have 77 elected county officials and the county assessors that are tasked by the taxpayers to place value on energy assets and other assets, whether that's homes or hotels or farm equipment, you name it. But in the case of energy, these counties are contracting with third-party appraisers to arrive at value on energy assets, whether it's wind farm or it's a pipeline. And in particular, we have one company that controls 47 of our 77 counties. That company is contracting, and there's just a fundamental difference in the approach to value at arriving at value for a wind farm or a pipeline. And so we have an inordinate amount of property tax protest, in which has created instability for everyone involved. And that's not only just for the energy companies, that's for the counties, that's for the local school districts. And so for the better part of the last 3 to 4 years, we've been working at the Capitol to find what is a solution to make this issue better. Because certainly at the core of it, when you have school districts that are budgeting and the amount of money that's being held up in escrow upon protest, that's an issue for those school superintendents and for those schools as they're looking at their budget. And so, as companies, we're trying to look at, what is the problem? Is this unique to Oklahoma? Because obviously we have assets in Texas and New Mexico and Kansas and other states surrounding, and we don't have this issue. And so it begs the question of why is this taking place at the rate that it is in Oklahoma? And so there's a lot to unpack, but that's kind of the genesis and the oversimplified version of what's going on, Scott.
Let me play this bite from last fall, because we've been covering this for quite a while. And I asked Representative Pfeiffer, is having one group doing all these valuations around the state a problem? Here's what he said.
I think it makes it extremely difficult. And I think part of the problem with this whole thing is some third-party consultants. So county assessors have the ability, again, we talked about not being able to know everything about everything. So through statute, they have the ability to go in and hire people to help them set values. What we've seen is one company really being the ones that most everybody uses, especially in some of these high protest areas, which have a lot of oil and gas and wind valuations in them. The basic premise was pretty simple, right? They'd come in and they'd go to a county assessor and they say, we can help you raise more money because we can find things in your county. At that time, it was mainly pipelines. We know you've got pipelines that aren't getting reported. They're not paying their taxes on them. So we can come through and we can, sign a contract with us. We can help you find these assets, place values on them, and raise your valuations, and overall raise your revenues and go to your schools and go to your counties. That's where it started. Then after a while, there was no more assets to find because we found them. And a lot of the stuff has gotten a lot easier because of technology, because, we now have access to geotagging. We have access to aerial maps, things like that, that we haven't had in the past. So technology and being able to help county assessors better use that is what the intention of the law was. Where we've seen, it's almost to the point now where it's a battle of personalities, which is something that's never good when you're trying to set policy. But that's kind of where it's got to, because you have one main county contractor that has gotten crossways with a lot of these companies.
It just, what Representative Pfeiffer said in October begs this question. If it's easier for these assessors with the technology they have to do the correct valuations, and why the heck are they hiring one company?
Not only does this one person involved in the beginning part of the process, he also does the education for the assessors. And then he's involved so he has the first touch with the assessors and their staffs when they're getting trained. So he's able to pitch his services, maybe not, at the class. And then he's able to evaluate the property, set the property value, and then he's involved in the appeal process. So he's involved in the beginning and the end, the whole way through the process. So, sort of like Mark was talking about, in the oil and gas industry, we do not see this kind of activity in the other in the surrounding states. So I think as a state, as a policy group, we need to look at ourselves and ask ourselves, why are we having all these protests? Why are these companies protesting only in Oklahoma, but they're not protesting in Texas? They're not protesting in New Mexico or Kansas or Colorado. So I think that's the main thing as a group of policymakers. We need to ask ourselves, why is this one person allowed to be involved in the beginning, the middle, and the end?
First of all, let me just say that I think our legislature has been tasked with a difficult issue to tackle, right? I mean, at the end of the day, there's pressures locally, there's pressures from obviously energy companies. None of us want to be talking about this, right? Property tax protests. It's not good for anyone. So they're in a difficult situation. I think that everyone that has been involved from a stakeholder standpoint would agree that there's not necessarily a quote silver bullet to this issue. But I do think that, Representative Pfeiffer and others at the Capitol have made good faith efforts in putting forth policy recommendations that I think bring us closer to solving this issue. And several of those in terms of additional training for county assessors. Again, here we are talking about energy assets. We know that we're a legacy oil and gas state. These assets are not unique and new. Wind, for that fact, is now 20 plus years old. And so at some point it begs the question, at what point should we expect those that are elected to place value on property? Why would they not be equipped and trained to be able to do this and not outsource that function to a third party? And I think that's an important question for our policymakers at the Capitol. There's other initiatives and policies that are also being proposed. I know Representative Pfeiffer has talked about trying to expedite basically all of the cases that are in appeal, creating a court of tax review. But at the end of the day, between Keith's companies and the companies that I represent, we've all been at the table. We participated in the interim study in September and have collaborated and been supportive of the policies being put forth. But we're starting to see, as you've seen kind of in the media recently, with the county assessors wanting to pull back some of the layers and the teeth of the policies that have been proposed. To Keith's point about the one individual that's in control of so many counties, trying to take the third-party assessor out of the informal and formal protest, the appeals process, is a part of the policy that we've been discussing, and there's now being pushback for that. And it begs the question, why is that? We're utilizing taxpayer dollars to outsource the role of the county assessor, but yet we're not held to account to defend the numbers that third-party assessor is putting forth. And so there's a lot of ongoing conversations, but we've been at the table and continue to try to collaborate and work towards a solution, even though it's not a single bill solution.
Keith, there is the possibility in some of this legislation to move this valuation aspect to the Oklahoma Tax Commission. Isn't that the simple answer to get this all done, is to let the people who know what they're doing, who don't have to outsource this, who don't have to bring on controversial figures to do this, to let the OTC do it?
That is one of the recommendations that we have made to the legislature. Not just Representative Pfeiffer, but Representative Dick Lowe and Senator Montgomery have all been doing a great job. I mean, I think we look at the good. We had the interim study, which was going to lead to some policy, and we have the policy out there, and everyone's talking about it. So that's the good. The bad now is that and it's their right to, but the lobbyists, the assessors have begun to come to the Capitol and lobby their legislators. And so we just need to do a better job of educating the legislators on what we think would be best, for their local schools and their local counties as we move forward. And, this comes down to economic development, Scott. Companies, whether it's wind or oil and gas, we can make investments other places. We don't have to do it here. We can do it in Panhandle of Texas. We can do it in the Permian. We can do it in North Dakota. So our companies can make investment choices every day. And this is just one thing that could be negatively impacting those decisions.
So what's the path forward? What are we looking for the next few weeks to break this log jam and finally get something done?
Well, I'm hopeful, right? I think there is some good faith policy discussions that are ongoing at the Capitol, and we do hope to see progress made. And I agree with Keith. I don't think it's all going to get corrected this year, but I also think we have to continue to talk about the status quo and how that's not okay. At the end of the day, this is a unique issue to Oklahoma, and we have to solve it. Because, as I said at the top of the show, it's not good for any of the stakeholders involved, the counties, the schools, the companies. And so we have to correct this issue. And so hopefully we're going to see more and more folks talking about how to correct what we have going. The system itself is flawed, but I am hopeful that there are going to be some policy solutions moving forward that we make progress on, because it is imperative. Because Keith hit the nail on the head. Companies do have a choice. And at the end of the day, when companies invest hundreds of millions of dollars into Oklahoma, then to be found out that, look, all we're looking is for fair market valuation, and to be held up in litigation over and over and over at the behest of basically one company controlling the process, that's not good for anyone involved, and it's not good for Oklahoma. So hopefully we'll find some solutions moving forward.
It's great. I'm glad the media is starting to look at this, try to get into the details. It's very complicated for people like me because it involves numbers, but nonetheless, it doesn't take long when you see the media eating one story alive, which deals with a sole source sort of contract and something like this, which is going virtually unnoticed. I mean, for the most part, most of the stories we've done on this issue that's been what's been talked about. Every time John Piper's been on here, he's talked about this, and it doesn't seem to resonate, but maybe it will. That's something that needs to come into focus, especially when you've got the OTC over there, which seems to me that's the fix. And as Keith hits it on the head, and why is one person insinuated doing situation and causing what appears to be some chaos? And schools need that money. And by the way, I know Wind Coalition, Petroleum Alliance, you guys love schools. I mean, see what you do for schools around the state of Oklahoma. There's even been some insinuation you guys don't like schools. I mean, this is nuts. And that's crazy talk.
And I'll offer this up to you, Scott. You know, all you have to do is go back and watch the recorded video of the September interim study, in which the third-party assessor involved in this, he made the statement publicly, and he has done before in other meetings as well, is that, you know, there's three approaches to value. There's the cost approach, the income approach, and the comparison to sales. But I prefer the fourth approach, which is I have a number, you have a number, and let's meet in the middle. And ultimately, that is the root problem that we see taking place in Oklahoma. And we have to challenge that. Otherwise, we're not going to get to where we need to be.
Appreciate what you guys are doing, and let us know if some developments and we need to get out to the folks.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you both. Have a great evening, guys.
You.
You too.